That was Atlas Collapses, and we were just doing a little bit of, getting to know each other during the break there. And
he's a good kisser, everybody. If anybody tells you otherwise.
They're filthy liars.
Filthy.
I'm glad that we were able to get that together.
Tickly beard.
Tickly, it is tickly. I've heard that. We were talking a little bit before about podcasts and the fact that both of us are enthusiastic about listening to podcasts.
Do you have any friends that listen to podcasts?
I have lots of friends that listen to podcasts, actually.
I don't even know a single darn person that listens to podcasts. I'm living in my own podcast world.
That's really too bad. But I mean, the thing too is when I was in Vancouver, they were a little bit more. That's where I found out about them. I didn't know they were a thing, and then I lived in Vancouver and picked up on like the Ricky Gervais show and those, and then it spiraled out of control. But I came back to the island in September, and you're right, it's not quite as prevalent over here.
It's not cool,
which is bizarre because it is really good. And I mean, it seems to me like every comedian in LA has their own podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is good and bad depending on the comedian, I think. You
said you like Pete Holmes. Tell me why.
I deeply enjoy Pete Holmes. I heard his show, or he was on a Doug Loves Movies a lot, and he was always so funny on that. And then I found his show and his stand-up album, which
Impregnated with Wonder.
Yes, which is hilarious, and I've played bits from it on the show a couple of times. And then listening to his podcast, he has a lot of the same neuroses and problems that I do, and if he doesn't, one of the guests that he's got on that week does. So it's nice to be able to listen to these people do things like, that are successful and working that have all of the same problems that I do.
True.
And that's what I like about Pete Holmes' show is that it's
Do you find that he loves himself a little bit too much?
Sometimes, but I think he has to.
He's going to hear this now.
He is.
He's going to hear this. He's going, they said that I love myself too much.
Yeah.
He's like Doug Loves Movies as well. Doug Benson.
Doug Benson is great.
Do you like his stand-up?
Not as much as his podcast.
Me too.
Yeah.
Don't tell him.
All of these guys are going to hear it. But I had another comic on from Port, and he worked in LA for a long time, and he called Scott Aukerman an asshole on the show. So I'm not that worried about our weird compliments, our weird half compliments to other comedians when... Yeah, apparently Scott Aukerman's kind of an asshole.
Yeah. He does Comedy Bang Bang / Death Ray.
That's right, yeah.
Why did they change the name? Do you know?
I do not.
Me neither. Let's not talk about it.
Let's not talk about why.
I don't care. I've never listened to it.
But you listen to a lot of shows?
I do. I got started because I used to listen to Adam Carolla back when he was on the radio. And I would just go to torrent websites and download his show. And then one day I couldn't find it, and then I was asking around on the internet, like, hey, where do I get it? And they're like, oh, you get the podcast.
Right.
And I was like, the what? Huh? And then they podcast it just like you podcast your show.
Yep.
In 12 segments. And then I found Hockey Central at Noon, Hockey Podcast.
Yep.
That one I listen to daily. And, of course, Adam Carolla. He was basically the genesis of me listening to podcasts because I had to in order to listen to his radio show, and then he would have other comedians on and they would talk about their podcasts.
And it spirals out of control.
This is like 4 or 5 years ago when I was like huge Adam Carolla fan.
Yeah.
And so he would go on other people's podcasts and that would be like, oh, I'll listen to that. And then I would see, oh, there's another guy that I like that's on it. And the next thing you know, I'm listening to all of them. That's how it was with Pete Holmes. At first, I was like, oh, he's got Bill Burr and Doug Benson and Adam Carolla and etc. I love that guy. And now I listen to all of them.
Yeah,
and you were saying you don't like it because it's too long.
Well, it's not that I don't like that it's too long.
No, you said you hated it.
I have a deep hatred for length. No, I found myself spending a lot more time listening to these shows than actually accomplishing anything. which is a dangerous thing. Like I know they're great for when I'm driving and stuff, and that's fine. But it was when I would catch up on shows for a day, and have a day where I just did nothing but listen to them.
That's what I used to do too. Just play video games and listen to podcasts.
Yep, it's a bit of a danger. So, but I do. I mean, I like it because I can listen to a lot of Pete Holmes and a lot of the guests that he comes on, even the ones that I don't know. I like learning about and hearing their stories for sure.
Yeah, I listen to podcasts at work. I work at a grocery store, and I secretly have an earphone behind this beautiful hair.
You do have a mane of hair, so I can see how you could sneak it in there.
It's a lazy mane.
A lazy mane.
Plus, it's really sexy. I mean, I don't,
It's
you can see it.
It's very soft.
The viewers can see it. I don't need to tell them.
The viewers.
So, yeah, I listen to podcasts like 7 hours a day.
Yeah.
Just at work, and then I try not to when I'm at home because I want to save them up.
Yeah.
And I also don't want to waste my time. I feel like I should be doing something constructive when I'm not at work, like working on my stand-up or practicing sitting down.
Practicing sitting down is tough, especially when you're a stand-up.
Yep.
Oh.
Doesn't get tougher than that.
Let's never make that joke again.
Sure. Or laying down.
So, like we were saying, it seems like most comedians have a podcast now. Are we going to be gearing up for the Scott Goglin podcast?
Maybe. I think so. I don't really feel like I don't know, man. I suppose I could, but I don't want to just talk to myself. I feel like when I get to know more comedians and when I get to be friends with more comedians, I'd like to interview them.
Yeah. Ask
them about their lives. But as it stands, I don't really feel like I have a real, I don't know. I'm spending a lot of time working on my stand-up, like basically just writing.
Yeah.
Which takes a long time.
It's a lot.
Like 1 to 3 hours a day. And then I work 8 hours a day as well.
Right.
And
so it's tough to find that time for sure. Yeah. All right. So podcasts, and you mentioned you're a video game player briefly in there.
Yeah. I actually had a pretty awesome addiction to a video game called NHL Eastside Hockey Manager 2007, which I'm sure nobody's heard of.
I've not heard of that
Which is fine.
Yeah.
You are an NHL general manager, and you draft players and scout players, and sign players, trade players. I could keep saying things that you do, but basically, I was unemployed for about 18 months, and I spent the majority of that time smoking pot, listening to podcasts, and playing that game.
All right.
And it's this crazy game because it never stops, and it never gets boring. And it's just constantly a new thing and a different thing happening all the time. So it's just this vortex of your life just doing nothing. It's incredible.
And before you know it, 18 months have passed.
I'm currently not playing it.
That's probably...
For about the last 2 weeks.
It's probably good.
I didn't play it for a few months, and then I got sick. And when I was sick, I had nothing better to do.
Sure.
And I wanted to kill time. So I started doing it again. And it's crazy because if you're bored and you've got a really good video game that's just living in your head 24/7, like it's the kind of game where you're thinking about it when you're not playing it, which is dangerous.
Very dangerous.
Because you need to be thinking about life.
Yeah, and the basic activities that you're doing all day. Yeah.
Yeah, and I play the EA Sports on the computer.
Are you mostly a sports game? Or exclusively sports games?
I also play Civilization. You know Civilization?
Yeah, the strategy game.
Yeah. But that's another... It's not as bad as the hockey game because it gets boring real fast.
Sure.
Whereas the other one just never gets boring. It's like heroin. It's my heroin.
You know what? You're right, though. Heroin...
Never done heroin, though.
No, never done heroin, but based on what I've seen, it doesn't ever get boring.
Yeah.
Because people just seem to be into it all the time.
Yep.
Don't do heroin. It's not.
Yeah, kids.
It's not good for you.
I know you're
heroin.
thinking that you want to be cool, like your old friend Jimi Hendrix, but he's dead. Okay, you want to be dead like Jimi Hendrix? If you do
heroin.
Go ahead and do the heroin.
Oh no.
Or your old friend Kurt Cobain.
They're going to isolate parts of this, and it's going to be recut as a, go do heroin, kids.
I do heroin. I love heroin. Kids, if you're not doing heroin, you're wasting your life.
See, there now that soundbite exists.
How did they do that so fast?
It's weird. It's weird that they were able to cut that together so quickly.
Barney, Your sound guy, Barney, I'm going to punch him.
Yeah, I hired my own producer because it's just far too much for me to be bothered with running the boards and being in charge of that. So Barney is here running the boards and getting beaten up by Scott Goglin.
Hey, I brought my tambourine. Do you mind if I play for a couple seconds?
Please do. Please play a song.
Check it out. I'm Joni Mitchell.
It's a remarkable tambourine that you play.
Thanks.
I'm very impressed.
Yeah. It's actually a loonie and a quarter. I figured that out while I was waiting for Tim Hortons, which
it sounds kind of like a tambourine.
Yeah.
I like it. I do.
Are we gonna hear a song?
We are. We're gonna play an older song. This is one that I don't think I've played during the day. I think I might have played it overnight a few times. But this is System of a Down, and the song is called Toxicity.